in 30 years, one thing or another will happen. Either the community will be prosperous or will be a shell of its former self. And I think that's generally speaking for what rural America will look like in 30 years.
So for those of you who follow along with me on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or read the blog at lostamericana.com, you know that one of the things I do when I'm out taking photos is I'm not just out there making pretty pictures. I have conversations with people that I meet. Some of them stop along the road when I've got my big camera out and talk to me. Other ones I bump into in local restaurants or stores when I'm there passing through. And I get a lot of the information about the places that I'm visiting, about some of these buildings that I photograph and the farms around the area. And on occasion, I'm lucky enough to get some time to sit down with somebody and actually do a proper video interview. I was lucky enough on New Year's Eve 2018 to be able to sit down with Stamford, Texas Mayor James Decker. I'd like to thank him for taking time on a holiday to actually spend it in front of my camera and talking with me when he had the day off and could have been with his family. When I do a lot of these, I don't always get to put everything out there that I wanted, and eventually I did a couple of articles about Texas and the North Texas area and some of the rural population decline that was going on there. And I submitted some of those articles, and one of them got published, and the one which was mostly the interview with Mayor Decker unfortunately didn't. And the eventual plan was to put it out there in some way, either in another publication or on the lostamericana.com blog. But once I wanted to make sure that it wasn't getting published somewhere else before I went ahead and put it up on my own blog, because usually places don't like it when you do that. So this one kind of sat around, and then COVID hit and it got a little bit lost in the goal of things that I needed to accomplish in 2020. But coming up on the 2-year anniversary of that interview, I wanted to get this out here. So the whole article is up on lostamericana.com right now, and I'm going to do a couple video, little snippets out of the video for this right here. One of the things I want to say to everybody out there who's listening, and those of you that are actually in rural small town America, is I think some of you know that, like, I pass through your towns. I stay in your towns when you have a hotel or motel or a campsite or whatever I might be doing. I'm out there, and I want to hear your stories, and more importantly, I want to tell other people your stories. Unfortunately, many of you in towns that are 1,000 people or less, you're the last of your kind. It's sad saying it, but many of your towns aren't going to make it past the half century, and you're the last person there in a lot of cases. Your stories are important, and you're the ones that are going to be turning off the lights, and I want to shine one last little light back on that as you're living in this place that everybody else has kind of turned away from looking at. I hope you reach out to me, whether it's through email, social media, even something as simple as a tweet. Just get it out there to me. Your story about what's going on where you live in maybe rural Nebraska can help kind of piece together other stories that I have if I'm in rural Georgia, or if I'm out back in the panhandle of Texas. There's a lot of similar stories, and I think a lot of people out there feel that it's just their area that's seeing the effects of this, and it's a lot of places, and you all have amazing stories, and I want to get them out there. So without further ado, I'd like to push you all on to some snippets from the interview I had with Mayor Decker. Go ahead, read the full blog article. These are some highlights from it, along with some photos and video that I shot in Stamford, Texas. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. I think Stamford's got a Facebook page as well. Hopefully some good things coming out of that town. It's one of those places that I've fallen in love with after spending a couple of days there. So I hope you enjoy.
Agriculture communities in Texas and in the heartland maybe we need to be more honest with ourselves. Our textile manufacturing plant closes, and you lose 50% of your jobs in your community. That'll get your attention in a hurry. Whereas your agriculture has slowly shifted and changed over the years, 50 years from ago to now looks very different, but the changes over the years maybe were imperceptible. So we need to recognize how the community, how the economy is changing, and then make an impact instead of waiting for the, the big just boom moment that completely guts your community. My name is James Decker, and I'm a lawyer and farmer in Stamford, Texas, and I'm also the mayor of the city of Stamford. So Stamford was created as kind of a transient railroad and ranching trading community. That's all. So this is in 1900. The railroad was extended from Albany to Stamford, and this is where the railroads crossed, and the community of Stamford was founded. And that's kind of the heritage that we still carry to this day, as a ranching, as an agriculture community, but also kind of a regional trading center. Of stores, businesses that were open downtown that aren't open. But I've seen things change for the better as well. I've seen some buildings that when I was in high school that were in danger of falling down that have been renovated and are now have a business going in it. And so I've seen kind of the peak and the valley. And something that always struck to me as a kid growing up was, it was always good to go visit places and see different stuff and see new stuff. But it was always good to be home. It's always good to come back to a place that you knew everybody, a place that people cared about you, and you're not just a random tourist in a place. And that always mattered to me, and that always stuck with me. Then I went to College Station, which is about 100,000 people. And then I went to law school in Lubbock, which is, in this part of the world, it's the big city in West Texas, about 200,000. So I had some familiarity with those places, and I knew that, it was great to live in those places. I'm glad I had the big university experience for college, for undergraduate and law school. But also, I was glad to have that experience to see that there are good things out there, different things than what's in our rural community, but also that, the grass is not always greener on the other side, where you move off looking for something, some dream that doesn't exist. You can see that cool stuff is out there, but there are reasons why communities like Stamford are important to the, the fabric of America. Agriculture has changed, the trade has changed. The railroad went out in the late 80s, early 90s, as a lot of railroads in America were being pulled up back before the rebirth of the railroads in the last 20, 25 years. And so that aspect of the community went away, but it still maintains its heritage as the trading center for this area, kind of north of Abilene, kind of between Abilene, Wichita Falls, back towards Lubbock. This is kind of still the largest community in that area, and where people come to do their shopping. In the old days, they came to do it at a bunch of different retail stores and mom and pop establishments. In this day and age, they come to do it at Walmart and Tractor Supply. So that they kind of have, as the nature of the business has changed, and there are fewer businesses in town, but the amount of business taking place here is still important and still vital to the community. And in reality, you can buy the same stuff in Stamford that you could 1950 relative to the culture. I mean, obviously there are different things for sale now than were for sale in 1950, but it's a lot fewer places. American retailers are being killed by online sales, whether it be Amazon or their own websites. And it's the same thing. Amazon has 2-day shipping to Stamford, and that's really handy. And sometimes I'll buy something on Amazon rather than go to Abilene to buy it, because I can guarantee that Amazon will have it when maybe an office supply store in Abilene may or may not have it. So that's kind of the change. And I think so people still have the availability, and that's a good thing. The good thing is you can still get all the things you need and live in Stamford. You're not living on a remote outpost where you can't get the supplies you need to live a modern lifestyle. But at the same time, you're not always buying it at home like you used to. I think one of the things that rural communities struggle with and rural businesses is that's the way we've always done it. Well, as the cliche goes, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. It's become in vogue to bash the dollar stores lately, and I think there's some valid criticisms of the dollar stores. But before it was cool to bash the dollar stores in the media, it was cool to bash Walmart. And it has been. I remember when Walmart came to town in Stamford in the very late '80s, early '90s. And we discovered here that probably people have said, oh, there's nothing worse than having a Walmart in your town because it kills all your local businesses. I've told people, and I told this during my mayoral campaign. If there is something worse than having a Walmart in your town, and that's having a Walmart in the next town over. those dollars that go through a big box retailer turn over fewer times than they do through an independent retailer. And so the key is to build around the Walmart. Is, you know, something that my dad has said many times, is Walmart doesn't want to do everything. So figure out what things Walmart isn't doing that you need in the community. You know, like I told you, we've got 2 financial advisors here. We've got really one of the region's more successful and, you know, growing farm and ranch real estate brokerages here. You know, those guys are community leaders. You know, my law office, it's important to be a member of the community here. We've got an eye clinic that people come, it's the only eye clinic in the area with an optometrist, you know, between Abilene and Wichita Falls. And there's folks come from counties around to come get their eyes checked. Our preacher has said one time that's always important to, you know, when you hear babies talking out in the sanctuary during church service, that's a sign of a healthy church, because there's young families there. If there's no babies in the sanctuary, there's no kids in the sanctuary, that's not a good sign of a rural church. Ultimately, you need to realize what makes people want to live in a place, and then find ways to serve, to provide those amenities and bring that quality of life to your unique community, rather than just saying, you know, here's the town, live in it or not, we don't care. If you do that, you're probably not going to have a hard time attracting your young people back. A community's vibrancy and its prosperity is based on young people coming into the community. Both its young people coming back and encouraging other young families to live in that community, to move in that community. That's why the suburbs in Texas are booming, because it's a place where young families can and want to live, and where they want to raise their kids. And I see a lot of those suburbs are trying to create culture and environment, and more power to them. You know, it's very impressive. I mean, they have seen the niche, but they're trying to create culture and environment that's based on what's been present in these rural communities since Stanford was founded in 1900. You know, I can think of a community that created a town square, because they built the planned community around this town square. Stanford's had a town square since they sold the first lots on the town square by the Stanford Town Site Company in 1900. We need to embrace that and realize that what folks are looking for is out there, but we need to give them a reason to want to live and do it here. Well, I think, you know, one of the things I've talked about, and I talked about this in my campaign, and I talk to people about this all the time. You know, our cost of living is extremely low here. You know, our cost of living is about 70% of the national average, last time I looked. Our housing costs are like 30% of the national average. A house that might cost you $500,000 in a suburban community, you can buy for less than $100,000 here. Silicon Valley is completely pricing its workers out. The cost of living is just outrageous. I think that's the sales pitch. You know, land is cheap, land is plentiful. I mean, what we think land is, you know, $1,000 an acre. We think that's expensive and exorbitant. And for, you know, agriculture purposes, to some degree it is, but for, you know, development and, you know, and relative to the rest of the world and rest of America, $1,000 an acre is cheap. Well, I see myself in 30 years of Stanford being a case study for the revitalization of rural America. You know, it's that important to me. It's that important to my family and my friends within the community that are working on that project. You know, I think if in 30 years one thing or another will happen, either the community will be prosperous or will be a shell of its, you know, former self. And, you know, I think that's generally speaking for what rural America will look like in 30 years. The farms will be bigger. There'll be fewer people involved in them. There'll be fewer, you know, it's really easy to talk about, you know, well, I'm not a farmer. Why does the farm economy matter to me? Well, if the farmer is thriving or failing, that matters to the restaurants that he eats in town, at the parts stores he does business with, at the tire store, at the Walmart. All of those communities all of those businesses in a rural community are involved in agriculture, whether they realize it or not. But I believe in looking at communities all across America and what have they done? How have they combated their decline? You know, you look in the South, in the Deep South, the tobacco economy collapsed. You know, the textile economy collapsed. And there are communities who've dried up and withered away, and there are communities who have thrived, who have had a rebirth of a community after their primary economy declined. And I think we can learn from those folks, big and small. You know, one of my pet peeves is that if we look to communities just our size or our neighboring communities as an example of what we're doing, Well, what can we learn from them? Well, who's to say that they're doing something any better than we are? Let's look at communities that are things are working. I've heard people say, man, if our communities could just survive, which survival is not. I don't want to tread water. I don't want to look up in 30 years from now and Stanford be just kind of slowly slipping into oblivion, but it be just we've just slowly done it till I'm gone, and then it's somebody else's problem to deal with. I don't want to see it survive. I want to see it thrive. I want to look up 30 years from now. I want to see that our businesses, we've got a vibrant business community. I want to look up at, our downtown is hopping in the evenings. That it's a popular place to live, that folks are looking for reasons to come here.